Indeed.
Despite the rains, the stalks feel as dry and stiff as a locust husk. Swainur says, "We know there is more grain in there, Trumbel. We won't settle for scraps while you grow fat on our crops." A muffled shouting emerges from inside the mill. Trumbel says, "The first of you drunkards comes through the door gets a shot between the eyes. Gods hear me, Swainur, I'll put you down like a dog." Swainur says, "Come away for now, lads. But we'll be back, Trumbel, and we'll have fair prices, or by the flame we'll have a reckoning." Windmill. An elven man stands before you, his relatively stocky build suggesting a life of labor. His face is pale and drawn, and his eyes wide behind him. A younger man and a woman exchange worried glances. The miller raises a club as you enter. It shakes violently in his grip. Trumbel says, "Get back, if you value your life." Arismital says, "Hold on, I'm not here to hurt anyone." The miller hesitates, then lowers the club. Trumbel says, "Wait, I know you. You just came into town, right? Don't tell me Swainur's already got his claws into you. Gods, that's all I need. Arismital says, who's Swainur? Trumbel says, the dwarf. The one standing out there spreading lies among the villagers. Bastardo's been here for decades, and he hasn't gotten any kinder with time. The miller hesitates, then lowers the club a fraction. Trumbel says, who are you? Is Swainur roping foreigners into his little crusade now? Arismital asks, what was all that ruckus outside? Trumbel shakes his head. Where to begin? Swainur's whipped them up into a froth, going on about the grain stores, claims I've hidden away most of it. All I do with the grain is sell it. I can't create it out of thin air, and I cannot hand it out for free. I pay the farmers for the crops they bring in, and I sell what comes out of the mill. Most of it goes back to the Black Hound on the west side of town for ale, and Swainur and his lot sure don't mind that part. You take a look at the fields on the way into town, the crops blighted, and most of what I'm getting from the farmers. Trumbel gestures to the sacks and containers. It's gone off, rotted through. I cannot pay top prices for blighted wheat, and I've barely got enough good grain to go around. Swainur's howling after things he has no right to. Arismital says, seems like a pretty clean story for a messy situation. Trumbel frowns, it's not. He pauses. Look, Swainur's always been a rotten bastardo. With stores so limited, maybe I save the good stuff for people who deserve it. Aufra, for instance. She's expecting a child. Should I let her starve instead? Arismital asks, do the villagers know about the grain supply? Trumbel looks embarrassed. Some. The innkeeper, for instance. It's better not to worry anyone. I'll be trading for supplies soon enough. If we can just keep things calm until then, we'll be in the clear. Arismital asks, the innkeeper? Trumbel winces. I wouldn't drink the ale, is all I'm saying. Arismital says, I see. I had other questions. Trumbel says, yes. Arismital says, my name is Arismital. I've only just arrived in Gilded Vale. Trumbel shakes his head. You picked a bad time to come visiting. Gilded Vale's had all its shine scraped off. Just a big dung heap now, and Swainur thinks he's king of it. They're all of them mad. Arismital says, I'll be going.
Hail and well met.
Trumbel nods at you, keeping a wary eye on both you and the door. You're back. What is it? Arismital asks. You said you were having trouble with the local farmers. Trumbel says, Swainur's been egging that lot on for days now. They've been keeping clear so far, but if things keep on like they are, I don't know how much longer we've got before things get messy. Please, if you're not here on his behalf, maybe you could speak to Swainur. He won't listen to me anymore. Just explain that we are all getting smaller rations now. We're all making sacrifices. Arismital says, I had some other questions. Trumbel says, yes.
Good day to you.
Arismital says, I'll go see what I can do. The miller all but sags with relief. Trumbel says, I'd be grateful if you did. He won't listen to me anymore, but maybe you'll have better luck. Tell him we're all having a hard time of it. and we'll all have to make some sacrifices. We'll be in your debt for it if you can convince him. Milgard says move along. Speak to Orgiat if you're in need of instruction. Keep out of trouble. Move along.
Hail and well night.
Arismital. Wait, what was it? I didn't read it. So Arismital was asking Trumbel about the situation. Trumbel breathes a short laugh. What's to explain? It isn't very complicated. I cannot pay top prices for blighted wheat, and I've barely got enough good grain to go around. Swainur's howling after things he has no right to. Arismital says, if you don't want those people in here with torches, maybe you ought to stop lying to me. Trumbel blinks, taken aback. I'm not. Look, it's not a lie. The stores really are low, and with so little grain going around, I had to raise the prices for some people. There are folks in this town that deserve far better than Swainur and his lot, people who have done more for Gilded Vale. Arismital asks, people like the magistrate? Trumbel says, I cannot do anything about that. Trumbel says, his voice quiet. That's just how it works. Maybe things are different elsewhere. Here, Rydric's men, they keep the village safe, so they eat well. Arismital asks, what do you mean? Trumbel says, Swainur, the rest. They've always been troublemakers, loud drunken fools. That woman with him, her soul traces back to Driahdon, that wretched brigand, and it shows. We have good people in this town, people still hanging on to what's left of it. They deserve a little more, that's all I'm saying. Arismital says, Swainur's people are farmers. They gathered that grain for you. Trumbel says, they sure didn't mind losing that grain when it was going into the drinks at the inn. They don't make like kind neighbors when they insult my son, go stumbling drunk through my own crops. You think they're the only ones that need to eat? Now the crops are sick, and the wind's too weak to get the windmill turning. Our village's children are born as empty shells. That's not my doing. This place is cursed, and Swainur and the others haven't done a thing to help the rest of us through the lean season. Arismital says, maybe I ought to go have a talk with Swainur then. Trumbel the miller all but sags with relief. I'd be grateful if he did. He won't listen to me anymore, but maybe you'll have better luck. Tell him we're all having a hard time of it, and we'll have to make some sacrifices. We'll be in your debt for it if you can convince him. Searu says, my father is a good man. He's always done right by the town. Ufdain says, I'm sure father can explain better just what's happened here. So this Ufdain and Searu, they are Trumbel's children? So this is Ufdain, the son, whom Trumbel said got insulted by Swainur. A rancid stench rises from this grain. It's mushy and mottled with green. Suenur, the dwarf, Brethan, and Gafwen. This Gafwen must be the woman that Trumbel said traces her soul back to Driedon, the brigand. Talk to Suenur if you have something to say, says Gafwen. Brethan says, a thing magistrate, half of us starving and he doesn't lift a finger.
Hello.
Suenur says, don't know who you are and don't much care, keep walking. We're not here to chat with foreigners. Aloth narrows his eyes. Careful, looks like they're cut from the same cloth as those rowdies who attacked me. He wrinkled his nose. Smells like it too. Well, yeah, Aloth, in that case, you're the one who provoked them. It's on you, not on them. Arismital says, I saw you outside of the mill. What was that about? Suenur says, well, someone fancies themselves a meddler, eh? What's that about? It's about Trumbel thinking he's king of the town, on account of he's got the mill to his name. Suenur the dwarf's jowls quiver with rage. It's about him barely giving us anything for the wheat we bring him, and then cutting our purses when we need to buy grain. It's about farmers going hungry while some bastardo gets rich off their crops. Suenur says, that's what it's effing about, now shove off. Arismital asks, what are you doing in here then? Suenur says, what's it look like? Drinking till I forget how much I want to put a pitchfork through Trumbel's face. Arismital says, Trumbel says you've been threatening his family. Suenur says, oh, I'd bet he has. All nobility that Trumbel. Two big, strong kids, purest soul in all of Gilded Vale. The dwarf sneers. Cowards sending out messengers to handle his business. Well, you can go and tell him we haven't had a solid meal in days on account of him. And we cannot afford a good drink on account of him. But we won't be bullied by some foreigner on account of him. Arismital asks, what if I buy you all around? Will you talk to me then? Suenur considers it, briefly. He looks to the others. Fair enough. You bring us something to wet our throats, and might be I'll fill up to trading words.
Hello.
Pasca, the innkeeper, smiles brightly at you. Hello again, come to rest your feet for a while? Arismital says, I like to buy around for the fine fellows over there. Pasca says, fine fellows? You're having me on. Any more fighting and I'll have to ban Suenur from the inn entirely. Pasca, the innkeeper, frowns. Until then, it's 6 copper pieces for the lot. Arismital gives 6 CP. Here you are. Pasca says right then, here, 3 drinks for 3 fools. Just take care with them, they're a hot-tempered bunch. Gafwen says, if you're not an ale, I don't have business with you.
Good day, stranger.
Suenur says, you again, what do you want now? Arismital says, I've brought drinks. Suenur says, hey, so you have. By the flame, I never thought I'd be so happy for a mug of the Black Hound's Pisces beer. Suenur says, gods, that's good. Alright then, you've got my attention. What is it you've got to say that is worth a round of drinks? Arismital says, maybe you could tell me more about what's going on. Swainur says, it's like I said, the miller is in charge of the grain prices. He says they're fair, but I know for a fact that folks like Aufra pay half what we do, the dwarf size, and maybe we've been a bit rough with him. But what are we supposed to do? We cannot keep paying, we're going to starve. And do you think Trumbel's going to be sorry about it when we do? Arismital says, look, there's no sense in threatening the miller. You have him up against a wall. Maybe you could ask some of the other villagers for help. Swainer eyes you for a few long moments, drinking deep from his mug. Then he sighs. You're right. Things go on like they are, we're just going to end up hanging from that tree out there. Swainer looks to his comrades. Tell Trumbel we'll leave him be. Don't know what we'll do now with the crops failing. Haven't got another trade to speak of. Think Pasca needs a hand around the inn? You've made your point, leave us alone, will you? Says Swainur.
Good day to you.
Trumbel nods a curt greeting. You're back. Have you had any luck with Swainur? Arismital says I spoke to Swainur. Trumbel takes a deep breath, and what did he say? Arismital says, I've convinced him to leave your family in peace. Trumbel says, wait, what? Why? That's great news. I wasn't sure you'd get through to him. They're out of their minds with drink, half the time. I owe you a great debt here. Trumbel pulls a coin purse from his hip and pushes it towards you. Today's earnings to show my appreciation. And you can be sure I'll let everyone know what you've done for me. Arismital says, that's really all you can afford? After I save your family? Trumbel says, oh, no, of course, that's fair, here. I saved some coin just in case well, here it is anyway, we don't need it now. Now we stand a chance of getting through the year. Trumbel smiles broadly. All thanks to you, safe travels, friend. Thank you again, I don't know what we would have done without you, says Trumbel. Searu says, thank you, you've given us a chance to turn things around. Ulfdine says, I'm glad you convinced them. Last thing we need is our grain stores burned down by a drunk. I should have taken the gold from Ingroet and Nonton when I let them go. What if they lied to me? What if the husband wasn't in the wrong? What if they made up a story about the husband being abusive? I should have taken the gold in case they were lying, so the gold will act as a compensation for me being lied to. What is this? Coles says, "Old sir, but a moment." A hooded man waits upon the road. Clad in a green cloak, he strides forward to meet you as you approach, and at a closer distance his features are revealed for those of a younger man, though lined with weariness. He appears to be favoring his left leg as he walks, and there is a dark stain upon the fabric of his trousers, under the knee. Even so, he greets you with a polite bow. Coles says, "I take it we'll be spared the sight of pitchforks and torches outside of our mill?" The man grins crookedly. "Good work settling that feud. No doubt Trumbel will sleep more easily." Gilded Vale has seen too much conflict these days. The loss of far too many lives, at the behest of fear and starvation. The village will not survive unless we come together to save it. I would seek your help, stranger, in this task. Arismital asks, "Who are you?" Kolsch says, "Only a man determined to see Gilded Vale restored to its former glory. There was a time, stranger, when Gilded Vale was worthy of its name. The weeds shone like gold on the hills, and the village's people lived well." Adair says, "I don't know about the golden crops, but there were less flies anyway." Kolsch says, "And what has become of it now? Whatever has caused the blight upon our lands, it is not the fault of its people. Rydrick looks to punish us for crimes we have not committed, and in turn he is blind to his own. I am not. He will pay for what he has done. I, Kolsch, swear it by the flame." Like many tyrants, he has surrounded himself with stronger men and women for fear of retribution. The man smiles thinly, "And so you are warned if you would press on despite that. However, I wonder if we might not help one another." Arismital says, "It depends. I do not..." Arismital says, "It depends. I do not help others out of charity." Kolsch says, "I see." His tone belies some disappointment. "Well, if I cannot appeal to your sense of justice, perhaps your practical nature will suffice. For the task I ask of you would improve all our fortunes." Too long has Gilded Vale suffered under Rydrick's madness. He would cure White One's legacy by ensuring there are none alive in the village to be afflicted. I fear his own wife, Ygritte, may be at risk. The man has no mercy in him. We have not stood idle. My people and I breached the defenses, intent on ending Rydrick's rule ourselves. We entered through the sewers under cover of night, but we were routed. His face darkens. There are dark creatures down there in the dungeons, the work of Rydrick's Animancer. It falls to you. Lord Rydrick has called for further reinforcements, and soon there will be no stopping him. Our time grows short, and in this hour I must beg assistance where I can. Aloth says, "He's going to owe us more than some rubble-strewn plot of land after this." Kolsch says, "Fling him from the ramparts or else cut his head from his shoulders, I care not. Once his throne lies empty, Gilded Vale will have the stewardship that it deserves. Whatever your reasons, I can promise you that your aid will not go unrewarded. Lord Rydrick has amassed the spoils of a long reign. End it, and you may take your fill." Arismital asks, "By what right would you unseat a thine of the Deerwood?" Kolsch says, "Perhaps things are different abroad, stranger, but here in the Deerwood we do not bow before self-made lords. nor suffer the cruel whims of nobles that do not deserve their titles. Aloth's eyes narrow, and I suppose this fellow thinks it make a better lord. I've heard this one before. Kolsch says, Lord Rydrick has proven himself incapable of just rule. He has brought his fate upon himself. Arismital says, I will find Rydrick and deal with him. Kolsch says, Then I commend you on your courage, and thank you for your assistance, but I would not send you onward without due warning. Rydrick's hold is crawling with soldiers and sellswords, all loyal to Rydrick. They will not take kindly to intruders. In truth, they will be all the more alert for our failed efforts. A frontal assault would be unwise. If you would brave it, you could follow our steps, and seek out the entrance to the sewers at the eastern edge of the moat. He looks away. But several of my men were captured. It may be the entrance has been found and sealed anew. So, entrance to the sewers at the eastern edge of the moat. Kolsch says, Those men were under my command. I would be in your debt if you found some means of helping them. Once you make it inside, seek out my old friend, Nedmar. He is the High Priest Baratheon, now that the Shining God is fallen. A good man in difficult circumstances. He will listen to reason. So, Nedmar, got it. Durance chortles, nearly choking on his own disdain. Shining God. He never shone so brightly as when the bomb took him. The moniker is obsolete now. Ash does not shine. Eder says, It's like if someone was to call you the attractive priest, Durance. Okay, I sense hostility between Durance and Eder. Cole says, Nedmar can help you reach Rydrick, but he resides in the upper level of Rydrick's hold, protected by guards and mercenaries. You will have to keep to the shadows if you mean to reach him without alarming the entire keep. Arismital says, Thank you for the advice. I will make good use of it. Kolsch says, I consider it a blessing from the gods that I have found someone that understands honor and duty. Rydrick's hold lies past the Estern Wood, not far off to the east. May Magran bring you victory, friend. I wish you luck. Hold up. Who says anything about honor and duty? I'm doing this out of profit. I was thinking of reporting the situation to the ghost of the killed husband, but I cannot do anything with his corpse now. And the ghost is no longer here. Okay. New map discovered. Unslocks compass. Hmm. Tilly. Egdrang. Two villagers stand by one of the tide pools. They are breathing harshly, clearly winded, and look up nervously as you approach.
Greetings.
Tilly says, if you're here to fish, as we were a stranger, you'll want to avoid the compass proper. The dwarven woman points to the southeast. Her companion, Egdrang, shakes his head. A lot of ships wind up spread across the rocks, here, so we didn't think much of the wreckage until we heard something. Tilly says a terrible noise. I thought maybe it was a survivor, but he wasn't alive, moving, but not truly alive. Tilly shudders. It was awful. Arismital asks, what do you mean? What did you see? Egdrang says, corpses. Walking corpses. We don't want any part of it, whatever the cause. Might be we can find something in these tide pools, and then we're headed straight home. Arismital asks, you said there are a lot of shipwrecks here? Tilly, the woman, nods. All the time. It's a lovely place, but dangerous as anything to sail. Good fishing most days. Tilly wipes her brow. I think we'll look further up the coast next time. Arismital asks, what are you two doing out here? Egdrang says, fishing of course, except I lost my fishing rod when I flung it at the head of one of those monsters, his size. We were looking the tide pools over and thought we'd try our luck down by the rocks. Got the fright of our lives. We'll have to make do with the nets here or go hungry. Arismital says farewell. Egdrang says, good tidings to you. Wait, do you hear that? Hear what? Wait. Oh. Wait, I didn't know there was going to be an attack. This is not my fault. I hate it. I didn't know there was going to be an attack. Dang it.
Of course.
How do you do?
Gods, what a mess. Thank you for your help, stranger, says Tilly. Ekdrang says the same thing, alright? To the southeast, eh? The wreckage. Let's check it out. Page from Fulvanus Travels. I met a helpful Deerwood woman while in Gilded Vale. She was an invaluable guide during my time in that sorry village, and agreed to accompany me some part of the way towards Anslog's compass. We parted ways in the wilds known as Magran's Fork, but I gave her my amulet so that she might remember me fondly. Perhaps I will return to this land someday after all. Didn't I acquire a Fulvanus amulet from a corpse somewhere? So this woman, the guide, she's dead. I see. Zaurip Champion. Fulvanus letter. How is it that so grand a journey as mine should lead me here? The people of the Deer would call this pitiable lagoon a sight to see, but all I have experienced here is misfortune. I thought to explore the cavern by the waters only to discover it was home to sporlings. I went to see the vaunted compass and lost the bulk of my letters when I tripped over some driftwood. And at last I made to inspect the dragon's skulls, nearby only to be menaced by some foolish little Zaurips. I will return to Gilded Vale as soon as I catch my breath. At least the Zaurips do not appear to have followed. So this is Fulvanus. So Fulvano is dead. I see. Clam shells and crab carapaces litter the coals. Zaurip Camp.
How may I help? I shall.
Page from Fulvanus Travels. While traveling west towards Gilded Vale, I encountered a fellow traveler of some considerable intelligence, and we engaged in pleasant conversation. It came to light that the poor fellow had the most execrable pair of boots upon him. I gave him one of my spare sets, that he might better appreciate Vailian craftsmanship. May they serve him well, for he said he intended to cross the wilderness known as the Black Meadow. I cannot imagine if it is a pleasant place. Okay, so far I've acquired Fulvanus amulets and Fulvanus gloves, but I haven't encountered Fulvanus boots. And I've been to Black Meadow, and I haven't encountered any corpse containing Fulvanus boots. Perhaps I should go back there again and check it out, I mean. At the center of a ring of jagged stone, this boulder casts long shadows across the sand as the sun moves overhead. Kana says, a lovely sight. Would that we could spend more time by the sea. So these are the shipwrecks that Tilly and Ekdrang talked about. Crabs and small fish cluster in this pool, left behind by the tide. Wait, what is it? Was it a letter? Was it a letter? No, not this one. Not this one. Where is it? Okay, this is the one I think. I haven't read this one. Sage from Fulvano's travels. After several days' journey, it seems it is time at last to part ways with my traveling companion from New Helmar. A pity we could not see the compass together, but perhaps he will have as grand a time in Geiran's grasp. I have given him my gloves for safekeeping, for I will hardly need them in such a fine weather. Sea Cave. Sporling. This thing is mentioned in one of Fulvano's notes that I encountered earlier in Anslock's compass.
Attend to the priest!
So what killed Durance? I mean, what knocked out Durance? Dead adventurers. Moss and mold cover the bones like a blanket. They smell earthy and wet. So what knocked out Durance? I wonder. Dank spores. These small feather-thin spores have delicate stinging barbs, by which they cling to surfaces, passing creatures and the inside of nostrils. Oh my goodness, inside of nostrils. So how did Durance get knocked out? I'm curious. They were doing good, and then suddenly Durance got knocked out. How? Ahoy there, ahoy, says Onamu Birdscorned. Onamu Birdscorn says, kind of you to stop and speak, my western friend. An Aumaua stands before you, his hair matted and once bright clothes in ruins. Equally ruin his face, a hatching of thin scars crossed by broader wounds. Birdscorn says, haven't seen another kith since my ship went down. I do not suppose you are looking to lighten your purse? Arismital asks, who are you? Ponamu says, I am called Ponamu Bird Scorn, chronicler of the Huana people. Strange, I know, but we do not choose our names, do we? Ponamu chuckles, running a hand across his scarred visage. Arismital asks, you were shipwrecked? Ponamu says, aye. We were transporting goods from the Deadfire to Defiance Bay when a storm took us off course and ran us ground here. Only I survived. Ponamu frowns for a moment, but then shakes his head, clearing the expression. Ponamu says, you should consider sailing the islands of the Deadfire, friend. No more beautiful a realm exists in the whole of the world. Arismital asks, what are you selling? Ponamu says, the ship's cargo, goods from the Deadfire, a few personal trinkets, all of the highest quality. I wouldn't sell them, but without coin, how am I to return to my homeland? Arismital says, let me see your wares. Ponamu Bird Scorn says, of course. Fish and clumps of seaweed, bright green with heat, royal in the stew. It tastes pleasantly salty. It's a zaurip. Tana. Tana grins toothily. Scree, says Tana. The zaurip jabbers unintelligibly. Scree. Ranga, you find yourself facing a towering Aumaua woman. Her skin is the warm gold brown of a dying sunset, with pale fish-white patches at throat and hands, wavy red-brown hair, pulled into tight braids around a stripe of bare skin that allows the curve of her skull flows down over her broad shoulders.
Well met, friend.
Oh my, I didn't expect this kind of voice from an Aumaua. She's an Aumaua, right? Those paints on her skin and her build. But her voice is so soft. I didn't expect this voice to come out from this character. Ranga regards you calmly, evidently unsurprised to find you here at the edge of her camp by the water. Have you come for medicines and craftsworks, or to share the fire? She gestures to the large cauldron nearby. Arismital asks, what's that zaurip doing here? Ranga says, who? Tana. He helps me gather ingredients, work the cauldron, things like that. He's been quite a help around here. Tana the zaurip lets out a rattling chirrup and bares its teeth in what you guess is intended to be a cheerful expression. Arismital asks, who are you? Ranga says, my name is Ranga. I live in Gilded Vale a time, working as a healer and a midwife. Perhaps you've been to that place. You'll understand then why I might choose to come south. Kana says, Ranga is it? Kana chuckles. And what are you Ranga Nui of, cousin? Why not sail north and join us in Rawatai? Ranga says, is that where you found that accent, Islander? Ranga smirks. Keep your Rawatai. I would sooner be king of this little island. Kana says, Irma, more of a little peninsula, I'd say. Arismital says, Aufra sent me here. She says that you know some way to ensure that her child is not a hollow-born. Ranga says, more of Lord Raedric's frightened flock. She nods slowly. You are kind to come all this way. Poor Aufra must be beside herself. I imagine she gave you something for payment. Whatever it is, you keep it. I don't need coin. I need you to do something for me. Instead, Ranga points inland. There is a Zaurib tribe to the northeast, led by one of their priests. Tana was exiled from there some time ago, and their scouts still lurk about this place, waiting for an opportunity to end his life. So Tana is a man, not a woman. I see. I thought by the name it would be a woman. Tana the Zaurib lets out a rattling squawk, head drooping. So why was this Tana exiled from the pack? Ranga says, one day I will have to go for supplies, and I will come back to find my assistant slain. How will I help anyone then? Ranga shakes her head. You rid me of this nuisance, and I will do what I can for Aufra, and throw in something for you too. Arismital says, I had to kill the Zauribs on the way here. They won't bother you anymore. Ranga says, truly, you are very efficient with your favors. Here, something for your trouble. Ranga nods and claps her hands once. Good, then I shall set my full attention now upon the remedy for Aufra. I will get started on the mixture, but I need one more ingredient. Some spores from the creatures in that cave there. Ranga points just north of a little stretch of beach. Sporelings, they call them. It is a useful material. I need one for the mixture. You are welcome to any others you find. Arismital asks, will you have a third favor for me to do after this? Ranga smiles. This is what I need to make the potion Aufra asks for. If you do not wish to help, then I cannot do anything about that, can I?
Hello.
Ranga says, careful with those sporelings. They have a way with the mind. Ranga taps her temple lightly. It is why the spores are so useful, really. So what? They're using the spores as a hallucinogenic? Arismital says, I have some spores here. Ranga says, so you do. Excellent. Give one here and I'll add it to the cauldron. This should not take long. Ranga says, the mixture is ready. Take this to Aufra. Tell her to drink it before bed. As it induces sleep, she should find herself more energetic in the mornings. Tell her to eat more fish and cheese. The potion will sustain a healthy appetite, grant her strength. She is a rather frail woman, from what I remember of her. Arismital says, wait, I thought this was a cure. Ranga says, I can tend to ailments of the body, I cannot cure an affliction of the soul. Certainly, not once inflicted by the gods. Ranga crosses her arms. I have explained many times, people will believe what they want. So let her believe, perhaps that will help. Faith is a powerful thing. In the meantime, she will feel much improved. And if her child should not be claimed by the legacy, then it will be born healthy. That I will promise. Arismital says, Ranga, you're nothing but a charlatan. Ranga says, nonsense. I am many years now a midwife. What I am not is a worker of impossible miracles. If you want to do something about the legacy, I'll tell you this. Better to deal with Lord Raedric. It's his punishment which drives this woman to me. I've done what I can as promised. Tell Aufra I wish her well. This is such a waste of time. If Ranga told me earlier about the potion not being a cure, then there would be no reason for Arismital to do this. I hate liars by omission, especially if it's an important matter.
Hail, traveler.
Ranga says, "It is good to see you are well. Was there anything else I can do for you?" Ranga laughs. "Not all my remedies are quite so difficult to obtain, I assure you." Arismital says, "Could I see your wares?" Ranga says, "Certainly, here you are."
Good day to you.
Arismital says, "I could use some rest, if you don't mind sharing your camp." Ranga says, "After all you've done for me, you are quite welcome. Get some sleep by the fire, and I will keep an eye on the tide." Western Barbican construction completed. Brutish warrior has arrived seeking employment. South Curtain Wall. The South Curtain Wall provides further protection to the Bailey from invaders coming from the south. Stronghold hirelings. You must build the barracks to recruit hirelings. Oh. Can I cancel this? Oh, I cannot. Dang it. Okay, fine. I should have built the barracks first. Dang it. Oh well.
Greetings.
Aufra says, "Oh, you're back. I did not think you'd be returning." Aufra gazes miserably down at her hands, laid protectively over her stomach. What is it? Wait. Let me check something first. Arismital says, I've brought you Ranga's remedy. Aufra says, you did. You really did it. Aufra stares at you a moment, her teary face stunned. Oh, bless you, bless you. I don't know what to say, I cannot thank you enough. Arismital says, wait, you should know something about that potion. Aufra blinks, looking down at the vial. What do you mean? Arismital says, it doesn't do what you think. Ranga says it will make you feel better, but that's it. But that's... Aufra's happiness quickly fades. But everyone said, she looks away. I should have known. I've been so stupid. How could I think? I'm sorry I wasted your time. I want to choose the clever option, but I don't think the time is appropriate for it. Arismetal says, I'm sorry it didn't work out like you wanted. Aufra is quiet for a long time, gazing down at her belly and the vial both. She reaches up to wipe away a tear. It's my own fault for believing it. Thank you for telling me the truth. Here, take this, and take this as well. It was Hathor's. I've been holding on to it, but I think it'll do you more good. I suppose all I can do now is pray. Perhaps the gods will be kind. Gilded veil, moderate, positive, HIV. Aufra says, what else is there to do? A hollowborn will mean our deaths.
Hi?
Aloth seems lost in thought. He flinches when you draw near, sucking a sharp breath through his teeth.
What can I do for you?
Arismital asks, are you alright?
Of course. Merely processing some of the unusual things we've seen lately.
Aloth's lips twitch into a flat smile.
And if Meowald is to be believed, it would seem you've an uncertain future ahead.
Aloth watches you carefully. Arismital says, there is no point in speculating now.
Perhaps Defiance Bay holds the answers we need.
Aloth snugs his cloak about his shoulders, glancing at you out of the corner of his eye. Arismital says, I want to discuss something else. Aloth looks at you with quiet attentiveness. How may I be of service? Arismital says, tell me about Idir. Aloth says, I've been gone for more than a year now, but I suspect I'll always think of the forests and fields of Idir as home. We've thousands of years of history and tradition behind us, and there's a sense of dignity and responsibility that comes with that. Aloth frowns. Of course, there's baggage as well. Our imperial past is still fresh in the minds of many, as you may have noticed here. Arismital asks, has it been difficult to adjust to the Deerwood? Aloth says people here are informal, hot-blooded. Aloth's mouth twists into a wry smirk, more attentive to insult than to duty. But as long as one avoids provocation, it's easy enough to get along. Aloth stipples his fingers. I've gotten accustomed enough to keeping my thoughts to myself anyway. So, why did you provoke the townsfolk then into fighting? Arismital asks, how long were you in Gilded Vale? Aloth shrugs, fidgeting with the hem of his sleeve. Not much longer than you. As you saw, it was hardly the haven that had been advertised. Arismital asks, any thoughts on what I should do next? Aloth tugs at his sleeve. Myrwald urged you to seek out these leaden key agents in Defiance Bay, yes? If his condition is any warning, we should find them with all haste. Arismital says that's all.
Aye? Hey, that old watcher. I don't know what I expected, but it sure wasn't that.
Adair shakes his head and chuckles. Arismital says, you said you had some things you wanted to ask him.
Nah, it's kinda embarrassing now. I just got a dumb idea in my head is all. Don't know why I thought it'd work. It's funny. That's probably the first thing I got my hopes up for in, I don't know, years. At least I got that out of it.
Arismital says, you were going to ask him in front of me anyway. You may as well tell me now.
All right. Guess fair is fair, and you did bring me to see him. Those rumors back in Gilded Vale about my brother, Woden, about how he'd turned against us and fought for Widewind, been on my mind for some time now.
Come to think of it, I did found a helmet belonging to Reatsera's army in the Temple of Eothas in Gilded Vale. Maybe some connection? Interesting.
Thing about Woden was, he always knew what was right, and that's what he'd do. One day he set out to fight for Deerwood against a man claiming to be our god. So I knew that's what I had to do too. It was right. But hearing claims that he died fighting for Reatsera's, that got me worried. Not that he'd chosen the wrong side, but that I had. Didn't seem right what Widewind had in store, but if he really was Aethys...
Adair shakes his head.
I thought, maybe this old Watcher would know how my brother died. So I could see if it was true. Like he could, I don't know, read it in my soul or something. Use our connection. Told you it was dumb.
Arismital asks, why didn't you ask me for help? Adair says, guess 'cause I didn't know you. It's hard to trust a stranger that says he's a watcher. But you trust my world? Interesting.
Of course, I knew the truth deep down. The Watcher's not psychic. I think I just had this idea, and the idea made me feel a certain way, and I didn't want to lose that.
And there says, really, if I wanted to find out about my brother, I shouldn't be starting with Watchers. I should be starting with records. Aris Metal asks, it took you 15 years to figure that out? Adair cracks a smile. Never occurred to me to go looking into it, not till you put some crazy notions about Watchers in my head. Adair thinks a moment, his lips twisted to one side, he raises his eyebrows. If there was anything written down about it, they'd have it in Defiance Bay. They got an archive at the palace.
You've done a lot for me already, but if you could see fit to pay that archive a visit with me, well, you know. Knowing my luck, the records clerk will go crazy and try to kill me. I'd feel better with you in there with me. Hey.
Adair scratches his head and smirks. Well, I guess talking to a crazy Watcher is better than talking to no Watcher at all. Aris Mittal says, I want to ask something about you. Adair says, if you're sure. Aris Mittal asks, what did you do before this?
Oh, other than the war, I never strayed too far from where you found me. Farming, mostly. I was never much for cities, never learned a trade. In my younger days, I thought I was going to go preach the word of Aethys, just in our temple there. My parents encouraged it. I made so much trouble for them growing up. They used to say it'd be best if I got in good with the God of Redemption. Of course, us blowing him up probably didn't help my chances there. But if anybody'd forgive you for blowing him up, it'd be Aethys.
Aris Mittal asks, did the people of Gilded Vale really try to kill you?
They, they did. It was strange timing, because we just won the war. They celebrated when I came home. There was music and dancing. Trumbel used half his grain making this big honey cake. I still dream about that cake. Like having the best lover of your life, but only for one night. And they were all sorry to hear about my brother. It took a while for word of the purges to reach us. Aethasians being murdered in the streets, cold morn and the like. No way would they let something like that happen in Gilded Vale. That's what they all said. But the weeks went by and the purges spread. Pretty soon they weren't so sure my brother fought for Deerwood. And they weren't so sure I did. It caught me by surprise after all the celebrating. Should have seen it coming after the tailor said he was going to fit me for some new clothes, but then all he wanted was my neck measurement.
Adair laughs. Aris Mittal asks, really?
Nah, not that last part. But you had to think about it. Says a lot about the place I've been calling home all these years.
Aris Mittal asks, why did you stay for so long in a town that hated you?
Well, I'm sure my parents are still wondering the same thing. The Aethasian purges were like this madness had come over the town, like a disease. Seems like when you see something like that, your instinct is to wait for it to pass, even when you know it probably won't. The family whose farm I worked on, they had a little hollowborn girl. And they heard the Animancers had this cure, the salvation it was called. They went running.
Adair pauses, lost in thought.
This salvation, they were putting animal souls in children. You might have heard about it, giving them enough personality to care for themselves. You can guess how that turned out. Matter of time, the children broke down, became wild things, monsters. Anyway, these farmers put the family dog's soul in their little girl. For a while, the girl, she's making eye contact, she's feeding herself, albeit in a kind of messy way. Then one day she snaps. They found her gnawing on her brother's bones. Had to chain her up, put her in a cow pen. Well, the mother, she wouldn't have anything to do with the girl after that. But the father, he'd visit every day, feed her chickens, toss water on her once in a while to get the dirt off. Most of the village, they'd whisper about him. Poor man, they'd say, sick with grief. He was just waiting for his daughter to look up one day and recognize her papa. He was waiting for her to get better. Didn't understand that at the time, of course, but these days I think about him a lot.
Adair shakes his head, and his eyes narrow, contemplative. Arismital asks, "Do you have any family?" Adair says, "Just my parents now. They took a ship back to Idir when the purges started. Wanted me to go with them, but I didn't see things like they did." Okay, thank God, so Adair's parents are safe. That's good to hear. Adair says, "Been a long time since I've seen them. I really should visit, but for some reason I haven't much felt like going home. Good thing they chased me out, or I might have never left." Arismital says, "Tell me about your brother."
Woden was, about everything you'd want your firstborn son to be. Dutiful, honest, put thought into everything he did. A real pain in my ass. Made me look bad about every way he could. It wasn't something he tried to do, but of course that just makes it worse.
Adair laughs.
Not that he didn't get into trouble himself. He was just better about feeling guilty after. We used to have this farmer near us, Hereward. Couldn't stop talking about how well he cared for his chickens, how their feathers were the whitest in town. Convinced the butcher to pay him double what the other farmers got. Me and Woden got tired of hearing it. I was maybe 11, 12 at the time. We borrowed about 6 different dyes from the dyer one night. Dyed Hereward's chickens every color but white.
Adair grins widely at something remembered.
Next morning, the butcher comes knocking, asking for 6 of his whitest chickens. We were feeling great, up until Hereward saw what we'd done. He just got on his knees and cried right there, all those colorful chickens around him not knowing what to make of it.
Adair chuckles, beaming mischievous pride. "Wow, this is cruel. You're just destroying someone's livelihood."
I thought it served him right, but I could tell Woden had other thoughts. Sure enough, the next day, every one of those chickens had been scrubbed down. They weren't white, mind you, but Woden sure tried. Never said a word to me about it, but I knew. That was Woden.
What kind of prank these kids were doing? They're messing with people's livelihoods.
My parents, they always let us be who we were. Never told me to be more like him or anything like that. Which was good, because I was never gonna.
Adair grins. Arismital says, "I want to ask you about something else."
What's on your mind?
Arismital says, "I was wondering about Eothas."
It makes 2 of us.
Arismital asks, "What is there to know about Eothas?"
If you're looking to find religion, maybe you want to start with a god that hasn't been burned to dust, but I won't stop you. Eothas, he was a young man with a silver crown. Carried a candle around with him. Sounds like I'm giving a bad eulogy here.
Adair utters an amused grunt. Adair says, "Well, He was a lot of different things to different people, I guess. Rebirth, redemption, light. Out in the country he's Gaun, the farmer, who helps all things pass seasons and people both. He watches over the weak, does Gaun, sees imbalances made right. You could see why all the copperless rowdies around here might take a liking to someone like that. He was real popular here for a time. These days you won't find too many worshipping Eothas in the open. It's hard to know who still does it in private and who's given up. Feels like I'm the last one sometimes. Adair smirks. If that's the case, he deserves all the mourning. Arismital asks, do you still worship Eothas?
In my way. I don't suppose he expects me to show up at his temple these days. Not much left to do for him other than keep his memory alive and keep hoping that he's just been playing a joke on all of us these past 15 years.
Adair says, as far as I know, he hasn't said anything to anybody since the god hammer detonated. Arismital asks, why worship him then? Adair grimaces. Well, if it turns out he's not dead, and I gave up on him, I'd have betrayed my god twice. Even the god of redemption's gotta have standards. I'd probably be reborn as a fat Aumawas horse. Adair says, that's not really it though, not all of it anyway. Adair casts a sidelong glance. Guess it's more, I still believe in the things he believed in. I just hope his death doesn't mean the death of those things as well. Sometimes it looks that way. Arismital asks, why did you choose to worship Eothas in the beginning?
Raised that way. My family's been Eothasian going way back. Suppose it wasn't much of a choice at first. Don't know for sure why my family started worshipping him. Probably because of Gon looking after folks like us.
Adair looks you in the eye conspiratorial. Could just as well be that my ancestor did something so bad only Eothas could forgive. It would explain a lot about where I got some of my less respectable traits. Arismital asks, did you only worship him because that's how you were raised?
There was something I genuinely liked about Eothas. Always. Like he understood people better than the other gods. Knew all our flaws and weaknesses and accepted us for that. Folks are at their worst when they're afraid. A god like Eothas, he made you realize there was nothing to fear. Made you a better person.
Adair shakes his head.
Of course, he goes away for a few years, and look what happens.
Arismital asks, what made you think Widewin didn't speak for Eothas?
Was his actions. Not when he started his rebellion, and not even when he took over Raed Saris. It was when he sent his armies into Deerwood.
Adair says, up to that point, he was sticking up for his people. That's what Eothas does. At least the Gaun part of him. Those farmers were starving and their government didn't lift a finger. I figured if it wasn't Eothas himself, at least he had the right idea. But then he sent armies across the board, even crossed it himself in the end. Word was, he was chasing refugees that escaped the rebellion, wanted to punish them, and punish us for allowing them to live here. That just didn't fit for me. Those are the deeds of a vengeful god, Skaen, or Voidica, maybe. Or just a man who'd lost his sense. I still have trouble believing it, but there's no one left to ask if it's true. Arismital says, tell me about the purges.
You sure you don't want to talk about something more pleasant? Like the War of Black Trees or the Legacy or something?
Adair looks at you as though he's looking directly into the sun. Adair says it's eye-opening, seeing just how naked you are when you've got no God to protect you. Saints' War was a hard time to be a dear wooden. People thought it was the end times. They'd talk big about how we were gonna defeat a god, but I don't think there was a man from here to the White March he didn't think he was gonna die. It does something to you, thinking you're gonna die at someone else's hands. There's a rage that comes indignation. Imagine a whole country full of that. Might have been Cold Morn that started it. Town near the border, they let White Wind march right on through. Rest of Deerwood cursed their names till the end of the war. Some say it was the Eothasians there that persuaded the town not to oppose the army. Others said it was just cowardice. It was like the legacy that way. No one knew the real reason, so they just picked whichever one best suited what they wanted to believe. Either way, that town was burning before the first ashes of Eothas hit the ground. And it felt good to the people here to be in control after being so helpless. So the fire spread. A lot of us Eothasians went the way of our god. So, Eder was implying that White One's army was so powerful and unstoppable that people in Deerwood think they're going to die, that they're hopeless. So how powerful was White One's army at that time? Adair says there were claims from the Church of Magran that she'd actually commanded the purges. I found that hard to believe. Sounded to me like people doing what they wanted, wrapping their god around it like she was a cloak. Then again, that's what I thought about White One.
What's on your mind?
Aris Mittal says, let's keep moving. Blackwater's Broken Tombs added. The quest expires in 2 days. What? Blackwater's Broken Tombs. At the southeastern edge of Air Glanfath, the isolated town of Irana's Tears, sits on the northern shore of the Lake of Drowned Tombs. Lately, a strange phenomenon has turned the lake's clear waters black. Stranger still, the town's stone tombs have been breaking open from the inside, the skeletal occupants slowly marching to the water's edge and into the depths. No companions at the stronghold. Ah, okay.
Hey, what's on your mind?
What?
Duran says, thought I felt your eyes on me. Now come the words. Aris Mittal says, I had questions I wanted to ask you.
If doubts and curiosity plague you, you're skidding your knuckles on the wrong door.
Aris Mittal asks, why were we supposed to meet? Duran says, the why of it is you're a watcher. Duran snorts. A watcher runs 2 roads of why. For me, it's more a matter of what. There was a time when I wouldn't have spared a thought for your words, or even bothered with you. But now seeking out watchers is what I do. To put the truth to them, see which of the 2 ways they bend. Duran smiles slightly taunting. So Durance is what? He's a watcher-hunter? For what purpose? To test them? To put the truth to them? For what? Arismital asks, truth, what kind of truth? Duran says, either you're a dry field in need of a harvest burning. He frowns for a moment, his eyes flat, or you're lost in the darkness. Either way you can see differently. Either way, you can see differently from others. Durance gives a half smile. Then his tone becomes accusing. I can tell by the way you notice the stuff first off. Not many can see it at first, nor the etchings or the flames, but your eyes. Durance stares at you almost eagerly, nodding. Your eyes trace the path that I could see. Arismital asks, so which are you, a dry field or lost in darkness? Durance's face tenses. The day we don't trade that question back and forth is the day our hands no longer need to be joined. And the trial? Durance's hand clenches his staff. The trial is done. What is it talking about? Trial? Arismital says, so you don't know either? Arismital says, you're putting me on a trial then? Durance says, you know this nation is disease. Don't need to be a watcher to see it in the children, the politics, the men that stalk the roads with knives in hands and murder in their eyes. This land needs life again. Now seeds planted in the burned soil. His voice drops mocking and his eyes narrow. And something tells me you can see the path to making that future happen, watcher. Your kind always does. So then, we need to make sure you see truly now. This nation, its people, don't need any more lights blinding them, nor do I. You test a truth, you don't blindly accept it. Arismital asks, and how do you plan to test me? Durance says, sharing the road of course, one truth to match another, matching each other's pace, keeping rhythm. Other priests can keep their teachings and rantings. For my faith, my teachings, sharing the road is a simple hard truth. Durance's smile widens and his hands tap against his waist, once then twice. When you knock one truth against the leg of another, why both legs stand firm. But now if you strike a lie at the knee with the same force. His smile dies and his eyes narrow. Why, you make a cripple with but one leg to stand on. Arismital asks, is that why you carry that staff? Durance says, is that why I? Durance is about to launch another volley of words, blinks. Then he rolls his head back and laughs deeply, the laughter coming until it seems the air will run out of his lungs, until it seems forced. Perhaps your words are worth listening to, watcher. Durance frowns, any trace of humor gone. But the truth will win out. Keep pace and we'll see. Arismital says, let me ask you about something else.
The cost of troubling me seems to worry you little.
Arismital says, I wanted to ask about the region and its history. Durance grunts. Arismital asks, can you tell me about the Hollowborn?
That's a curse that runs deeper. It's a godhammer of a different sort. And like the godhammer, it was made by men's hands.
Durance's voice becomes bitter. Durance says, all things have a price, left unchecked, faithlessness, virtues. It leaves marks on souls, until souls don't have the strength to enter bodies that are pure. Animancers, ciphers, all who play games with the fabric of souls are to blame for the barren field they leave behind. Durance glares at you. Even watchers can do the same. Some simply watch, others try to weave souls, guide them as surely as white went across Evon Dewer. Durance turns away. That is why I correct the hollowborn when I find them, and the ones whose hands have led to this seed being spilled on the ground. Aris Mittal asks, correct the hollowborn?
There are fewer souls. There are more vessels. It is simply equaling of the process.
Aris Mittal asks, so it doesn't... Aris Mittal says, that's murder.
I feel more remorse in putting down a slathering hound. A wict? Less than a mongrel in its misery. Murder is a kindness, not a crime. Always has been. I would sooner put the blade to those who are to blame instead. If any spirit should be punished, it's theirs.
Aris Mittal asks, and who's to blame? Duran says, the fields of the deerwood are filled with weakness, ripe for those that play with souls' minds. Duran's face wrinkles in a frown. Animancers and their kind, watchers too. They bear more of the burden than their victims, and more of the punishment. Every year has seen a new crime, the Saints' War, the Hollowborn, and the Salvation. So, Duran's earlier mention wicked. That was the creatures that I encountered in Black Meadow, right? Aris Mittal says, there is no proof watchers are to blame for these events. Duran says, there are a few who can shape a soul in such a fashion. Duran stares at you, and any watcher, any true watcher born in the Deerwood, would be able to see the crime, even if they did not cause it. Silence itself is damning. Aris Mittal asks, why don't you end me, then?
Murder you? I would not grant you any of them. The mercy I grant the Hollowborn. You would not be deserving of it.
Durance laughs coldly. Aris Mittal asks, you'd equate murder with mercy?
Murder is an old word. Mercy is letting a soul fly free to the next body. True punishment? Ruining someone to their soul. Crack their spirit like you would crack their skulls with a staff. Beat them. Hurt them in mind and body, so their souls become shards. But you leave it inside the vessel, like a bag of glass, to either choke on it, or pass it through their bloody stool.
Durance coughs. Durance's hand tightens on his staff, as if reciting a cadence.
Then, leave it in the body to think on it, like planting a new field with the right seed.
Durance makes a locking motion with a twist of his hand, then grins, satisfied. Aris Mittal says, that sounds like you've committed it to memory.
Many marks may I make upon your flesh, but flame leaves marks that cannot heal. Magran doctrine dictates true punishment is one that remains in memory, in the soul, in the flesh. Even should the victims die, slowly or swift, sometimes by their own hand afterwards, the lesson lingers, burned in their flesh.
Aris Mittal says, that seems harsh.
Have you seen a man branded by flame? He remembers it always, in every waking movement. It is a lesson writ in the only ink and vellum that matters, blood and flesh. One can burn the soul as well. It is an art, and I do not take pleasure in it. But there is more at stake here than forgiveness. Many of Aethys' faith were punished in the purges following the Saints' War. And the ones that harmed children, they suffered worse.
Aris Mittal asks, what do you mean?
We did what must be done. Wherever they were rooted out, their souls reclaimed. And if they couldn't be reclaimed, we ensured they would never inhabit another body.
Durance's face hardens. His hand clenches his staff. Arismital says, I wanted to ask about the region and its history. Arismital asks, do you think there's any tie between the Hollowborn and the god Hammer?
Aethys was the god of rebirth, and his light does not fall on the Deerwood. I've heard some claim it's his doing, his death. It's closed the halls to new souls. I doubt it. The Hollowborn have their roots in the acts of men, women. I feel it.
Duran says, keep troubling me, and I may extend the tithe bowl for each questions. Enough questions for now. Let the road keep us until the next campfire. Oh, dang it.
What? If doubts and curiosity plague you, you're skinning your knuckles.
Arismital says, tell me about Magran. Duran says, are you a servant of Wile? Let mysteries and questions remain with him, at least until the next time we need rest.
What? If doubts and curiosity plague you...
Arismital says, I want to know more about you. Duran's grunts. Arismital asks, where are you from?
Where I hail from? From one of Magran's fires. A cathedral. Ashfall. Made of blackened trees.
Duran sighs, his hand tightening on the staff for a moment, then relaxes.
I studied the scriptures there. The fires carved into the land. The trunks of the burnt trees. And in the factories where the rifles and cartridges were shaped. All are chapels in other devotion.
Arismital asks, other devotions? Duran's nods. For Magran, any fire is enough for worship, physical or not. A blacksmith's anvil, a craftsman bench, all arenas where fire is waiting to be born. Duran snaps his finger. It just needs a spark, like an alchemical fire, or a spark to cartridges, to speed them to their purpose. Arismital asks, their purpose? Duran tilts his head thinking, well, their purpose then. It was many thens ago. Duran scratches his beard. Beard was a little brighter than now. But yes, cartridges, guns all had a purpose, and that purpose was punching holes in mages and letting their pompous air hiss out. Durance gives a half smile, then a nod. Woke their kind right up and kept them staring at the ceiling in the dark instead of sleeping. That's for certain. Aloth rolls his eyes. Pompous air indeed. Duran says, a little violence has an accounting, an answer for unchecked power. Well, Magran gave an answer for that. Ah, I see what Duran's meant. Arismital asks, Magran put soldiers and mages on equal footing? Durance nods again. Mages were troublesome in that time. Firearms made every man a mage, and a caster's pretty arcane shield was little match for them. It turned each commoner into a beast that could spit fire. It leveled the field of battle. that's for certain. Made many a mage a grave. Ah, yes, I see. So, firearms were created to counter the mage's powers. And Aloth is a wizard, right? That's why he responded when Durance was talking about pompous air in mages or something like that. Arismital says, tell me more about Ashfall. Durance says, do you have Wild's eyes painted on your skin? There's more mysteries than questions, and even a marching force of answers won't placate you. Even soldiers need to let their thoughts settle, just as their priests do.
What?
Durance says, your face is full of need. Durance snorts. It looks to bear as if he didn't speak.
If doubts and curiosity plague you, you're skinning your nut.
Arismital says, Durance is an odd name. Durance says no more than Watcher, and Durance is not a name, it's a title. Arismital asks, so what does the title mean? Durance snorts. What does a Watcher mean? Durance is something sacred of Magran, one of her memories perhaps, a branch of teaching. He taps his staff slightly, as if remembering, then shrugs. Let us not waste time talking of it. We have not shared the road and fire long enough. And this teaching of Durance, well, Durance is not a popular chapter of the faith. Arismital says, I had other questions about you. Arismital says, you don't dress like a priest, and your robes look as if they were touched by fire. Durance says, it's as if you swallowed a gadfly nest. Keep silent and keep them to yourself, lest you tire yourself before the next campfire.
If doubts and curiosity plague you, you're skinning your knuckles on the...
Arismital asks, that staff of yours, can you tell me about it? Durance glances at his staff, then at you and gives a crooked smile. Cannot take your eyes from it, Durance chuckles. Durance himself favored such knotted twists of high heat. It was said, no shame in it. Arismital asks, why are those symbols carved on your staff?
Carved? This staff is a history. Acts leave their mark. Some symbols fall into the ash, others blaze brighter.
Durance coughs, then his voice settles with an almost proud strength. Arismital asks, what causes one to fade and another to rise?
Memory, meaning. It's same as the memories in your head, perhaps more trustworthy. Random acts, things done with instinct, they may make lines burning briefly through the wood. Acts devised, planned, that stay with you. Symbols form and tell the story.
Durance snorts, seemingly at himself.
It's like all memories, except the staff burns it true. When a thought's close, you see it clearer, brighter. Ones you forget, they get buried. But like rings in wood, the etchings remain. Keeps me grounded. Also, it's a solid walking stick.
Durance grunts, his face relaxes into a grin. Arismital asks, how is it only watchers can see the symbols? Duran says they are energies of the spirit, a channel for one's faith. Duran's frowns. It's hard to say. There was a time when they glowed brighter, but now they are an aid in my work. Because the staff's markings stand out to a watcher, well, they sometimes identify themselves, Duran's frowns, and sometimes they're blinded to the staff as well. A gift of Magran, perhaps. Cloak itself from sight when one isn't looking for it. Aris Mittal says, I want to ask about something different.
I suspect the answers will seed more questions.
Aris Mittal says, I wanted to ask about the region and its history.
If doubts and curiosity... If doubts and curiosity plague you...
Okay, it seems Durans don't want to talk anymore, at least not now, I think.